And I know I'm putting you on the spot, and I think it's important that you do share what you shared with me at that time.
So,
Can I ask a tough question? Some folks in the audience probably want to ask, but I also want to lay out the introduction, which is that when you and I first talked about Mimblewimble coin, you had a very important explanation that I think got lost because a lot of folks didn't come back to you and ask you why you were involved with that. And your point at the time I thought was profound, and I'm sharing it for the first time here. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I also know a lot of the folks in the audience want to hear the answer to this. You told me that at some point we need to recognize we're all about hard money, and maybe something even harder than Bitcoin would come along someday. And if that's what the ideology is and that's what you're after, we need to be open to the possibility that something harder than Bitcoin comes along. So share with me, because we talked about that. This was way back when. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I also think a lot of people respect you and would love to hear you say this. And I think it's important that you do share what you shared with me at that time.
so in the battle for monetary sovereignty, I came from this with a worldview of being a monetary sovereignty maximalist because Bitcoin didn't exist. And gold was our best tool to accomplish that. And so that's what I started my blog and wrote about. And then Bitcoin came along and I fit Bitcoin into my worldview as opposed to, coming to Bitcoin and then fitting monetary sovereignty into my worldview. And the way I look at it is optionality is always a better thing. The more options we have, the more choices we can make. And so, we're coming from a system where there's a tremendous amount of monetary repression. That's the whole goal of it. That's the whole reason we have money transmission laws and like all of this stuff is to decrease our options. And so the way I look at it is like the more options, the better, and everybody's going to find a different tool to accomplish what they want to do. And the more tools we can have to accomplish the purpose of monetary sovereignty, the more wealthy we'll be in terms of kind of the monetary sovereignty that we can actually achieve. And so that's how I kind of look at it. Bitcoin very much was an experiment. Like I started talking about it publicly as the first blogger with like an audience at less than $1 million market cap.
Right. Didn't you start
Right.
buying it at 25 cents?
Well, no, this is when I started publicly talking about it. Like, I mean, I talked about it because that's the altruistic thing to do. The competitive thing to do would be to like let people figure it out on their own while I buy it cheaper, right? I mean, but we time and we have to, we've had to build this industry kind of out of scratch, and there's a whole lot to that. We have to learn how to store our private keys and like do all these things, right? And so, but that's the way I look at it is like we want options, and the more options we have, the richer we are in terms of choices or permutations of what we can do. Now, does that mean that you allocate bunches of capital into whatever the different options are? No, but it gives you opportunity to innovate. And, like the previous panel that we talked about here, complaining about scalability, complaining about not getting confidential transactions into the base layer, complaining about, the Chaumian mints centralizing into custodians, the lack of the peer-to-peer electronic cash nature of things. One of the reasons I think gold is so successful is because you're able to melt it down and recast it. So you eliminate that transaction history. That's not a possible thing to do with, I guess since it's Satire Night, with BlackRock AML KYC coin that's trackable. Right? Like it's hard to do that with that. And one of the principles of a monetary good or a monetary tool would be portability. Well, portability used to mean like being able to transfer it over distance. But what we've seen with the regulations and things like AML KYC is that they try to restrict portability to transferring between people and not necessarily distance. And so like that, we have to be adaptable as we go into the future. We know that the other side's going to try to trammel our monetary sovereignty. And so the more options we have, the better is the way I look at it. And experimentation is a wonderful thing to do. So like I don't see any issues.
Yeah, by the way, we all missed you, and I'm glad that you're
Thanks, Galen.